would like to call upon the most esteemed leader, Lerato Molebatsi. You have read her biography. Lerato and I, we work together at Lonmin. She's a phenomenal leader. She's a sister to me. I am so blessed to have met Lerato. We have continued to be sisters, and she continues to support me. And for that, I am so grateful. Lerato currently sits on the board of the Reserve Bank of South Africa. She's the former CEO of GE in Southern Africa. She's got wide experience from government as DG, she's worked across different industries. She was at Lonmin as an EVP. She's a phenomenal leader, a phenomenal sister, and I am so grateful, Lerato, and welcome again. I will hand it over to you. Thank you.
Hello, thank you very much, Dr. Mpofu. And I really just want to thank you for the opportunity to have this very important conversation. Good afternoon, or it's actually good evening for the people that are in Australia. Good morning still for those of you that are in Southern Africa. And yeah, thank you once more. And when patients asked me to speak about this, I had initially thought about, putting together a set of slides and, taking you through what my thinking is around diversity and inclusion. And I mean, when we first started talking, this was all in the context of what are we doing in this COVID environment when people are unsure about their jobs, people are unsure about their businesses, especially small business. And we have seen how the pandemic has decimated many a small business. So the questions that we were asking ourselves is, how do we navigate through these uncertain times? And while we're talking about it, boom, the death of George Floyd in the USA happens, and we see the world turns topsy-turvy as a result of that. And we then said it's going to be important for us to have a conversation about inclusion and diversity, about anti-racism and racism. And, is the whole issue around the COVID pandemic and the issue around diversity and inclusion, are these issues mutually exclusive? And we came to the conclusion that it's not. And this brought me really to a place where I thought about a line, a paragraph out of A Tale of Two Cities. And it goes along these lines. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness, it was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity, it was the season of light, it was the season of darkness, it was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair. And these words just resonated, because I think where many of us are at is that it's very easy to see this period as Armageddon, where we will not be able to make money, or that there are retrenchments or redundancies in our roles in corporates, etc. But there's also a silver lining, and my view is that we should not waste a good crisis. And I want to share with all of you two stories, because I think stories are a better way of driving the message home. In 2000, in the year 2000, actually, I had been working for Old Mutual, and I was moving offices. And I moved to an office in Sandton at the Nedbank offices. At the time, of Mutual and Nedbank were starting to build a solid relationship around banking and insurance. And I was the head of public affairs and stakeholder relations. And I went into the building. I went to security. I was asked to go to security so that I can have an access card. And lo and behold, when I went into that office, I met a guy who had been my jailer, for lack of a better word. When I was a student, I was an activist, and we got arrested under the state of emergency. As a 14-year-old young girl growing up in Soweto, politics were our everyday life. And I saw this man there, and of course he did not recognize me. I did. I saw his name. I remembered who he was. I remembered exactly the things that he said and did. And I was in shock. I walked away and I called my boss. And I said to him, this is what has happened. And he said to me, please don't go there. I will send somebody to you now. And someone was sent to me, and they did this, the whole security thing, and I started working. A couple of days later, I was passing through security, and one of the security guards said to me, the guy who was here apparently has left the organization. He was made to leave because apparently you said something. Now, I'm telling you this story because for the team, for the people that are on the webinar who are not from South Africa, South Africa has a policy on Black economic empowerment, and part of it is also about bringing in employees who are Black and female. So it's about gender, it's about race, it is about, you know, bringing in people with different abilities, and I just don't want to call them abilities. But I'm talking about the story specifically because it talks to two things. One, it talks to leadership. The person that I reported to, who was the CEO or the deputy CEO at the time, exercised leadership. So I was sufficiently empowered to speak to him and say to him, I will not work in an environment where I've got to see this guy every day when I come to work. He did not even discuss with me what he did. The guy was gone now. That's when I, as an empowered employee, come into an environment where I am threatened, and I had thought that there was a different culture in the organization, and the leader of the organization steps up and he exercises his power to do the right things. And let me park that. The second issue for me was the fact that when I was in that role, I had come straight out of university, had joined another financial services company. And on the back of a leader who was in that previous company, who said to me, come and work, you have just come out of university, here is an opportunity for you as a trainee manager in the organization that I work for, that is empowerment. And that level of empowerment also said to me that I am sufficiently empowered also so that I can empower others. So the challenge for organizations today around equity, around diversity and inclusion, is that we go into organizations, or people go into organizations, and when I say people, I mean people of color. And I don't like the term people of color, but I think in the US, it means also other people who are not African American. So I will only just use it for that purpose. But Black people, and I'm using this terminology, please, for those of you that are not in South Africa, I'm using it for all the people that are not white. So the challenge for many Black people who come into organizations is that they come into organizations where the culture of the organization is not an inclusive one. first and foremost. And secondly, when they come into these organizations, the leadership in the organization is not supportive. Now, one of the things that COVID has, I think, is teaching us, and it's a lesson for many corporate executives who might be part of this webinar, I think we need to recognize a couple of things. One is that the fact that we are working from home brings me to say to the leaders, to those of us who are leaders on this platform, that this is an opportunity for us to do right by the people that work with us, firstly. Secondly, the challenge for corporates today is that the micromanager is dead. The fact that we are working from home, we are self-managing, says to us, is there still space for people that are going to be looking over other people's desks to see if they're doing their work? The answer to that is no. Many CEOs, and I read this in a McKinsey article the other day, many CEOs are saying, well, this is the new normal. The fact that people go into offices and we're paying top dollar or rands for office space, those days are gone. We are now having to relook at our office requirements. And a lot of people are also saying that I am a lot more productive working from home, although other people are saying I'm actually doing far much more than what I was supposed to be doing. So I'm not balancing my home, my work life. So the opportunity is for leaders when looking at diversity and inclusion to say, having seen the picture of George Floyd and the white policeman who had his knee on his neck, and people all over the world saying it is enough. Where is the silver lining here? Are we going to wait as corporate leaders? Are we going to wait as business owners for others to tell us what to do, or for legislation to drive our actions? And I ask this question also in the context of the fact that when you look at the diversity and inclusion process, certainly in South Africa, post 1994, when South Africa attained freedom, one of the first policies to be implemented was the whole question around Black economic empowerment, which speaks to equity and in the workplace, speaks to ownership, and where Black people should participate fully in the economy of the country, not just as workers, but also as business owners. The process has been slow and arduous. It has been challenging at best, but it has also been empowering in some instances. And that empowerment also is driven by and large by the leadership of the organization, because leaders in organizations are the ones who drive company culture. Many organizations live and die on whether or not there is a culture of inclusivity within the organization. So, I mean, I think most of us who are here have heard we've heard the saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And it's said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. I say culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you don't embed within your own organization a culture of inclusivity, a culture of diversity, a culture of leadership with empathy, a culture where the organization knows that profits, people, and the environment live side by side, and that it cannot be profits at the expense of employees. It also cannot be profits at the expense of a culture which engenders trust, where people come into the workplace and they know that it's a safe space. It's a safe space for people who are living with disabilities. It is a safe space for Black people. It is a safe space for LGBTQIs. It is a safe space for people who bring into an organization a different kind of thinking. And I think that COVID as a disruptor and the events in the US are going to disrupt and have disrupted, in fact, the world as we knew it then. And I want to come to now a second example. And the second example relates to me joining Lonmin, where I met Dr. P. She had already been working for Lonmin when I joined. So I joined Lonmin in 2013. So the events of Marikana, where miners died, 34 miners were shot down and died in 2012. So in 2013, for my sins, I joined Lonmin as Executive Vice President for Public Affairs and Communications. And the role was really to look at the Lonmin brand to see what went wrong and how we could fix it. There was new management. I mean, there was a mixture of the old and the new, but there was also new management, and there was the challenge of communities or a community around where the mine is placed, where there was no trust between the community living where the mine is or where the mine is placed, and the employees, and the relationship also between government and the company. And then, of course, there was the issue around shareholders who were also very unhappy about what had happened. And of course, you can imagine it impacted the share price, it impacted relations with suppliers, it impacted relationships with customers. So I joined Lonmin as an executive vice president to change all of this. And I just want to say that, I mean, one of the first things is that this role had been the role of a male. So Black female, first Black female on the executive, and I must bring about change. Now, you know, in South Africa, and probably this is a global phenomenon, the issue of being the first. Many of the Black people that get to have a seat at the table want to remain the first. And this is what this transformation should be about. Do not be the first and only. Be the first so that you're the first to make the right changes and to impact the organization positively. So we, walked in there and looked at how we could change these relationships, which were mainly, I mean, as you may well know, that mining is a male-dominated environment, and the events that led to many of these miners dying had to do with pay. And the questions around diversity and inclusion have also a lot to do with pay parity. And I don't want to call it pay parity. There's a lady called Blessing Omako, who works in the not-for-profit sector, who wrote a powerful piece on what she calls introvism. So, she talks about the issues of pay and why it is that in organizations, men and women get paid different salaries for the same job and the same level of experience and or expertise. And nobody stands up and says, why is it that Lerato, who is on the same level as I am, is Black, I'm white, but earns less? And when people do not use that kind of privilege to change things in the workplace, it is very difficult for organizations to move to new levels, right? So the changes in the organization happened, and they happened not because all of a sudden Lerato comes into the organization and she does a brilliant job. Far from it. The job was about me getting to say, who are our stakeholders and what went wrong? And by and large, what went wrong was the fact that when we walk into organizations, we do not change the culture of the organizations. Leaders are about coming into organizations and saying, how do I make sure that this is an environment where employees are heard? We don't only talk to them through the trade unions, but we speak to them directly. We communicate in ways that show empathy. We also communicate in ways that are transparent, and we show our employees that we are accountable. So communication also becomes a very big part of how you will be changing the culture of the organization. But more often than not in organizations, communications experts forget that communication is a two-way thing. It's not just management telling employees what is happening in the organizations or what to do. It's also about having the employees feedback to the organization. And communicating with authenticity means exactly that. You allow that there should be dialogue, that there should be opportunity for the people who work underground to have a conduit or a voice, so that you know exactly what is going on in the workplace where they are concerned, and they voice their concern, so that we do not shut those voices out. But an important issue also about the whole issue of change in the workplace and diversity in the workplace is that, do we have programs within the workplace that are transformative, that speak to how we do things? Culture is one of those things. I mean, when we put together strategies in organizations, we put those strategies together when there isn't a culture which helps to embed those strategies. We may as well not have done anything about these strategies. So working on the culture of the company, where the culture of the company is not just us writing policies and saying that these policies are the ones that apply here, but culture is how we do things. So at peak performance, it's Patience and her team saying, this is how things are done here. But more importantly, it is how things are done here when no one is watching. Because many people have left organizations and they say they don't leave the organizations. People say that they don't leave the organizations, they leave their managers. They leave those people who are making it unbearable for them to thrive in an organization where they are investing their time. If you're spending just a little over 8 hours of your day in the office and you're getting no joy out of that place, it means that you're not being productive. It means that the company is actually losing out also on the opportunity of someone probably who is very innovative, or someone who could potentially be a very passionate worker and bring about the right kind of changes within the organization. So when you do not bring people who are different, who think differently, you also lose out on an opportunity to innovate, to get to market quicker and faster, or with a lot more agility. Because when we employ people who are like us only, we are losing out on an opportunity of a huge part of the market. I mean, the world has more women, more females than there are males. But in the upper echelons of organizations, there are more males than there are females. And these are people who are making decisions about what we like, what we eat, what we wear, and they're not us. So my question and my challenge to board members, to executives who are sitting in these corporates is, if you know that you hold that seat at that table and you have an opportunity to make these changes, why are you not making those changes? Why are you the one who is blocking the opportunity for organizations to thrive? And also, why are you the one who is contributing to this time bomb that is racism, that is already exploding in our faces? So I think that this is the silver lining, that knee on George Floyd's neck and this COVID has brought to us, is that we're now all equal, really. And we can see that with COVID, it doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter where you live, we're all vulnerable. And whilst we are vulnerable, and whilst we are tackling the issue of a healthcare sector which is buckling under the weight of these new infections, and while we are experiencing a world which is in turbulence because of race relations, this is the opportunity to make the kinds of changes that are going to impact the world differently. And the truth of the matter also is that what we are not looking at is the extent to which organizations that are not transforming are also going to lose out on customers. Customers are starting to ask the questions around, is this organization diverse? Is it inclusive? Is it an organization which uses child labor? Is this an organization which looks at the environment, and what is their carbon footprint? And what is it that they're doing to ensure that there is sustainability and that they're not part of the problem? So diversity and inclusion, in fact, are not a nice to have, but they're important if we are going to have sustainable businesses, and if we are going to have a workplace which innovates, and a workplace which is a pleasure to go to, but also where we're increasingly finding that there is pressure around our reputation as organizations to look at ourselves a little bit more deeper than we had done previously, and to do the right thing. And then lastly, I want to just on the issue of inclusivity and diversity, I want to talk about privilege. And I know that many of our white colleagues struggle with the words, with the issue around white privilege. And I want to challenge the Black people who have the privilege of holding senior positions in the organizations that they work for, to communicate these uncomfortable truths to senior management and in the boards that they sit on, to use their privilege as HR practitioners for pay parity and pay justice, where as an HR practitioner, you know that it's not equal pay for equal work. My question to you is, what are you doing about it? Because you have the privilege of knowing what people in those positions should be earning. And if someone is being shortchanged and you're doing nothing about it, well, where is your conscience and where's your sense of doing right? Because we can talk all we want about diversity and inclusion, but if we don't walk the talk through the policies that we implement, through the power that we hold in these organizations, and through the privilege that we have in these organizations, then we're talking to ourselves. So my challenge to you is go back and not only to look at your organization, but also to look at others. And I think this time has also taught us, this COVID period has also taught us about compassion and leadership with EQ. So let's exercise our privilege and use EQ to make sure that our EQ, collective EQ and IQ, to do right by the companies that we work in, and also for the businesses that we're either going to start or that we have started. I just want to thank you for the opportunity of speaking to you, and if there are any questions. And thank you, Dr. P, for the opportunity.
Oh my God. Thank you so much, Lerato. This is insightful. For me, the pay parity is so important because if you think about the UN sustainable, like the UN Women Sustainable Development Goals in terms of women empowerment, women were always left behind. And economically, it's a rippling effect. If I'm getting 20% less than my peer, male peer, I'm already left out 20%. And therefore it means I'm already disadvantaged. And I think this is one important aspect that, companies should be looking at. Totally agree with you. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Can we please have our last poll? Please, can you just answer this question? Feedback is so important for us. What topics are you most interested in hearing about in future? How to turn my knowledge into an online profitable business, how to develop my mindset to lead my teams, practical strategies and tools to start business in uncertain times, how to scale, grow, and fund my business in a recession, social media strategies for lead generation, digital transformation strategies for business, diversity and inclusion strategies, how to create value for my business through investments. So the topic for our next webinar is digital transformation strategies for business. And we have number 2 is how to develop my mindset to lead my teams, and how to scale, grow, and fund my business, and then how to create value for my business through investments. And yeah, so it looks like digital transformation for businesses. That's what people want to know. All right. I guess this is the end of our session. I would like to thank you. Thank you.